If you want to journey deeper into the creative possibilities of life, your life, and if you want to understand more of who you are and how you work, if you want to live the best life you can, then this episode of this podcast is for you. So welcome to Embody, the podcast where we dive deep into the meta skills of embodiment, breathwork, and deep mind to enable you to live even better. This episode is on the art of creativity, and we are looking at the science and the art of being fully alive, curious, responsive, and playful in the world. I mean, what is creativity anyway, and why does it matter? We are going to look at what the science says, and we're going to engage in a brief experiential practice at the end for you to take away and weave into your life, looking at some of the dimensions of creativity. So let's start with some science and take a look at your nervous system. First of all, it's made up of cells called neurons. You don't need to remember these names. It's just let the story weave itself through your synapses and your brain. But these neurons and these supporting glial cells, which kind of look after them and look after your brain as well, they clean the brain, it makes up your central processing unit of your nervous and endocrine systems. And it's made up of billions of both these sorts of cells. Each neuron is also connected to around about 50,000 other neurons, making up a processing unit of trillions of these connections, or synapses as they're called. And the best estimate we have at the moment is around about 500 to 1,000 trillion synapses in the human brain. And we know that intelligence, your intelligence, any intelligence, my intelligence, is not about the size of your brain, but about the quality of its networking connections and how we utilize these. The human brain is adapted for learning, and learning keeps growing these networks. Let's look a little bit more at neurons, and again, we're going to find out why this information matters. Why does it matter? Who cares? Different neurons respond to different stimulation, first of all. Of course, you've got the ones in your eyes respond to qualities of light, the photons, and the ones in your ear to pressure waves in the air, and the ones on your skin to heat, pressure, or pain. And neurons communicate with each other through a combination of chemical and electrical signals, and they're responding to stimulation by changing their internal chemistry. And these chemical and consequent electrical changes are the firing or activation of that neuron. So we get this firing or activation of the neuron with those inputs of stimuli. And this neuronal activation translates as the passage of packets of information, with the information communicated depending on what sort of neuron it is, which other neurons, organs or glands or muscles it's connected to. Now, neurons communicate across the synapses, that's the gaps between the neurons, the joining places between the neuron and the gland, the neuron, the muscle, the neuron, and the organ. Those synapses, they communicate across that by means of chemicals called neurotransmitters. And these depend on how much of a transmitter is made, how many receptors for it there are, and how rapidly or slowly that neurochemical is reabsorbed. These differences are partly genetic, partly created by life circumstances. And early years adversity, for example, plays a huge role in terms of the amount of receptors and the amount of chemicals being made and so forth. One example is a condition called anhedonia, which is when pleasure is less available. And this can be due to a reduction in the neurochemicals of joy, less receptors for them, and so on. And this can arise from childhood adversity, and it can also lead to things like depressive tendencies and so forth. Now, fortunately, this is the good news. Fortunately, with the right context, the right help, methods and time and diligence, the brain's structure and function can change. And this is a process called neuroplasticity. Basically, neuroplasticity is a kind of learning. Now, of course, neurostability comes first. That's why appropriate context, diligence, and methods are needed, because in the learning of neuroplasticity, appropriate repetition is needed to make it work, right? And in that, new networks, change of perspective, and the new meanings and narratives that come with this all arise. So that's the process of learning. Now, neurons only fire when they receive sufficient stimulation, and after activation, a neuron has to briefly rest while its chemical constituents return to equilibrium. So we've got these cycles of activation, return to equilibrium, and that's called a neural oscillation. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Brain waves are the electrical measure of these cycles of neural oscillation. Now, brain waves are measured in frequencies of what are called hertz, that's cycles per second. And the different brain waves have different ranges of frequency bands, cycles per second, and represent different qualities and states of mental activity and perceptual possibility. And the various brain waves have names, and we're going to look at these because these become really important for how you live and how you live well. And of course, we're going to look at breathwork and how breathwork can impact these. And these brainwave states are alpha, beta, gamma, delta, theta, and mu. And we're also going to look at how meditation can impact these. Again, that's alpha, beta, gamma, delta, theta, and mu. And you don't have to remember them. Just tune in and let your brain networks bend around the words and soak them up like you did when you were in intense learning state called childhood. That's where children are, in the intense learning state. Just soak up the story. Now let's have a look at beta waves first, because that's the busiest brainwave state, the adult brainwave state, and occurs between the range of 12 to 30 hertz. And it's associated with normal waking consciousness of getting on, getting about in the world and doing what you do. Their daily life, busy business brain. Okay. Now, low amplitude beta waves, a little bit lower, around 12 to 16, are often associated with very active, busy or anxious thinking, whilst active concentration is more associated with slightly higher range of 17 to 30 hertz. So slight differences here we're noticing. Okay, so when people do brain scans, we can see what's happening inside of brains in this way. Now, beta waves also occur in relationship to muscular movement. Interestingly, particularly isotonic contraction and an increase in sensory feedback during what's called static motor control. And this is the kind of thing like you might find in a somatic yoga practice or possibly in Pilates. Although yoga, other patterns present when the breath is kept deep enough to also relax the brain more fully. So when we have a breath quality added in, then it changes it again. So beta waves are less present just before and during changes in movement as well. Now, when movement is voluntarily suppressed, then beta waves increase, which may be indicative, and this gets interesting, it may be indicative of why it's so much easier to drop deep into relaxation after a strong movement practice, rather than trying to go deep into relaxation directly from the beta state. That's harder. A good lesson there for anyone trying to relax. Do some movement first, and then your no yoga nidra or your NSDR, non-sleep deep rest practice is going to be so much more successful. Try it, find out for yourself, because actually it's your subjective inquiry that's going to give you that as to whether that's accurate and valid for yourself or not. Now remember, relaxation is no longer a given. In the modern world, relaxation is not a given. It's a skill set we learn, and appropriate movement can help its access. Like I say, it's much easier than simply lying down and trying to relax. If you're trying to relax, you're failing at relaxing. Relaxing is the end of effort, not merely an alteration in its intensity, isn't it? Yeah. So curiously, we only get established in beta waves as our normal diurnal pattern, that's the daytime pattern, from around about 7 years, the Rubicon years. So before that, we're in a different brain state. We'll get to that soon. Now, in the frequency range of 8 to 12 hertz, that's just below beta, we have alpha waves. And alpha waves arise from the electrical activity of the thalamic pacemaker cells, a part of the brain called the occipital lobe. Don't need to remember that. But alpha waves represent alert, a kind of wakeful relaxation, daydreaming, if you like, of the sort that arises with softly closed eyes, or if you are gazing peacefully at the ocean, or a beautiful natural scene, or maybe just about to drift off to sleep. Alpha waves are present in this kind of state, pre-sleep drowsiness, and they're reduced when you open your eyes or altered when you do fall asleep. Alpha waves of this relaxed mental state are centered in the occipital lobe, And this kind of wave doesn't exist in babies until they're about 4 months of age or so, when it starts around about 4 hertz. And by the time the child is 3 years old, it's become a more mature kind of 10 hertz. So it changes as we mature. Alpha waves are more abundant in the posterior parts of the brain during meditation than during simple relaxation, again, which is interesting. It's useful to see the distinction. We don't yet know why this is, and it's possibly because meditation has an alertness. Authentic meditation is alert and relaxed at the same time. So you've got relaxed and you've got alert, and meditation is a combination of those two capacities, increasing relaxation and alertness. Now, alpha wave activity can also occur during REM sleep, located not in the occipital region, but in a more frontal, central, and possibly thalamic location. Now, why alpha wave activity occurs during REM sleep, we don't yet fully understand. And one suggestion is that it represents more wakeful periods in this part of our sleep cycle. So we're slightly more awake in the dream state. And the thalamus is involved in episodic memory. That's the kind of biographical memory of where you remember things that have happened in the time band, in the place, it's called temporal binding, where you'll remember when and how things have happened in your biography. And the dream state is one place where we do this kind of memory consolidation. So it may well be that in that kind of state, what we're doing then is coming slightly out of the theta state, the top edge of it, and then doing memory consolidation, dropping down again. Now, during the course of a busy beta brainwave day, I love to stop efforting and simply drop. It allows my brain to be more effective and less tired if I do an alpha break than if I didn't take a break. So I tend to do a bit of kind of NSDR practice to do that on a fairly regular basis. Now, I do this using my breathing practice, and I can drop from, a busy alpha state, complexity, busy brain, into a state of soft relaxation within 9 breaths. And that's simply by breathing in, spreading the nostrils slightly, tongue in place behind the top teeth. I put my tongue behind the top teeth and relax the jaw, relax the cranial nerves that inform the face, relax the upper shoulders, cranial nerve 11, relax those nerves. Breathe in super slow, nasal inhale into the abdomen. Second top up inhale. Hold it for a moment or two, and then just briefly long, slow exhale, whatever feels right for the body. Now, I don't teach counting in breathing practices particularly, or not very often, simply because I think it's really important to listen to what the body says. And I think there's a lot of domination of the body that occurs in breath practice, where people aren't listening to the physiology, not listening to the quality of what's happening in the brain. They're not listening to the quality of what's happening in the body. So what they tend to be doing is driving the breathwork practice from a cognitive level of, this is the practice that I've got to overlay on my system. And that then becomes an overlay. So when we work more effectively, we go into, and again, I call it the yin edge of listening, where we're going in deep into the body, deep into interoceptive listening, and then feeling, what does the body say about this exhale? What does the body say about this breath hold? What does my physiology say about this pattern of breathing? And because if I'm present and clear and fully here, then most likely my brain is oxygenated. If I feel slightly fizzy and fuzzy and dizzy, then the most likely outcome is that my brain is reduced of oxygen, because my breathing practice that I've overlaid is putting out too much carbon dioxide, and that's not letting oxygen get out from the red blood cells into the cells of the body and the brain. So I'm deoxygenating myself. So paying attention to what the body says, paying attention to what the brain says, is much, much more important than counting the breath. Counting in 7, holding for 7, that kind of thing is domination. So I think it's really important, if you want to go deeper into breath work, you have to start tuning into what your body says, what your brain says. All right? So there's a lot there. I know that. There's a lot to take away and that kind of thing. But I find these practices are so useful, so beneficial for my creativity and overall well-being. And again, I'm going to give you a little bit more of an experiential practice very briefly at the end, okay? So let's go to the next brainwave state. Now, theta waves are fascinating, and they occur in the range of 4 to 7 hertz, so quite a low rhythm. And they're associated with deep relaxation, trance work, REM sleep, and daydreaming. Now, these waves are present when the eyes are moving from side to side in rapid eye movement sleep. You can try that if you want to. We might do a bit later. This is suggested to be an aspect of the left-right integration of the cerebral hemispheres. And this integration has to do, so we're told, with emotional processing, reviewing the emotional content of life while seeking past experiences of the same quality. Yeah, what is this like anything that's happened before? This processing is also about us locating who we are in this world of emotion and relationships, which as mammals we have to do. And theta waves are also connected to memory consolidation and, like we said, and the development of skills. Now, this kind of dream space is directly related to imagination and therefore creativity. Children grow up in the theta space. It is the intense learning space, so theta state is profound. Theta states also occur in experienced meditators. Now, this is fascinating. If you think about this, experienced meditators can access the dream state in their meditation. Now, that is a skill worth having, isn't it? Yeah. Now, during meditation, theta waves are abundant in the front and middle part of the brain. Like I said, this is experienced meditators, so it's a skill well worth cultivating. Now, in shamanic traditions, drums and dance have been used to evoke theta states. The rhythm, about 4.5 beats per second, appears to be the rhythm. Here we go. This rhythm of about 4.5 beats per second appears to be the rhythm that takes the practitioner into the deepest states of trance consciousness. And anyone who's been in a peyote ceremony might know this as the rhythm of the water drum, which goes on through the whole night, the whole duration of the ceremony, all the way until dawn. Now, interestingly, the chanting of mantras by Vedic and Tantric practitioners appears to have a similar effect, as they transport the practitioner into states of theta wave-related bliss. Om Ahum Bendragurujnana Sagara Bam Harini Sa Siddhi Hum. Om Ahum Bendragurujnana Sagara Bam Harini Sa Siddhi Hum. Whatever the chant is that's being used, when it's repeated, and again, if we go into the tradition, we'll find these kind of chanting prayer ceremonies would have lasted for hours, and they would take people into these states. Now, theta states are also connected to accelerated healing potential. Yet most people as adults rarely access the theta state unless they enter the dream state. Medication, alcohol, and stress all hinder this possibility, making this state a very precious resource, and most people don't have a meditation practice so they can access it in daily life. Now, Yoga Nidra is a practice many people love, and at its best is an exploration of the capacity to sustain alertness as you drop from beta into alpha, from alpha into theta, and potentially even from theta into delta states. Delta we'll come to in a minute. Now, Yoga Nidra is also potentially a profound preparation for lucid dreaming and dream yoga, again, which we'll talk about in a minute. But lucid dreaming most probably occurs in theta and gamma states, and gamma we're going to talk about in a minute. And that gives a sustained prefrontal activation that allows observing and choice in the dream state. This kind of trance work, as in shamanic journeying, teaches you to keep your prefrontal cortex softly online and active while you drop and navigate through the brainwave states. Now, curiously, there's a theory called hypofrontality, transient hypofrontality, which suggests that altered states of consciousness, psychedelic altered states, tend to occur when there's transient hypofrontality. That's where the blood flow to the prefrontal cortex shuts down. And that may well be the case. However, in advanced practitioners, what I'm suggesting is that what occurs is hyperfrontality. Hyperfrontality with a reduction in the selfing, or the default mode network, and the selfing narratives, because we're focusing so fully on that task of chanting or breathing and being present, and we have trained ourselves to keep the prefrontal cortex on in meditative states for extended periods, what happens is we get transient hyperfrontality with reduced default mode network activity with gamma state synchrony, all at the same time, taking us into this elevated state of supreme, incredible presence, which may have psychedelic qualities, but all of them are available for observation, witness, and direction through the prefrontal cortex, and that is pretty profound. Now, the next brainwave state we're going to look at was actually discovered in Tibetan meditators. So it was unknown in the Western world until Richie Davidson did some research with some Tibetan meditators, Mingyu Rinpoche, in fact. And these are gamma waves, with the frequency being 25 to 100 hertz, but normally 40 hertz upwards. And gamma waves may be implicated in creating the unity of conscious perception through the mechanism of consciously focused attention, like we're saying. Now, originating in the thalamus, gamma waves can sweep the brain from front to back 40 times per second. And they're integrating a whole range of different neuronal circuits into the attentional field and creating the unified framework of consciousness. And in this case, a level of consciousness that is unavailable unless you've accessed depth practice. But if you think about it, it's pretty awesome because you can change the structure and function of your brain through practice to create states of being like this. Now, gamma waves may unify memory and visual associations with current attentional focus to generate a coherent and consistent feeling to perception. Now, gamma brainwaves increase in the brains of experienced meditators again, and they denote powerful focus, such as you find in absorption-based meditative practice. That's a practice called dhyan. Now, they are very, very weak in normal brain activity, so again, this has to be trained. It's one of the roles of discipline. Spikes of gamma also associated with bursts of insight, those kind of aha moments. That's gamma size. Now, in longer term and more experienced practitioners, there's some evidence that the brain begins to operate more fully in this kind of gamma synchrony on a regular basis. This alert focus with high levels of left prefrontal cortical activity and less activity of the selfing mechanisms, the default mode network and so forth. Now, the left prefrontal cortex up here is associated with greater executive function, problem-solving capacity, clearer perceptual focus, and, interestingly, enhanced states of non-contextual joy. Now, the activity, this is why we're talking about keeping this on and training to keep this on, the activity of the left prefrontal cortex is also associated with a reduction in fear and anxiety states as well as depressive tendencies. And the fact that gamma waves increase in meditation is of huge interest, surely. Now, lucid dreaming is when you're awake in your dream. And again, it's a natural human skill. It's best done in conjunction with the meditation practice, and I'll explain more about this later. But it probably happens when the brain is either in theta or gamma wave patterns. And lucid dreaming is when you're awake and conscious and your prefrontal cortex is on in your dream state. Again, it's pretty awesome. Yeah? Lucid dreaming is profound. Now, a lot of, if you go on to sort of lucid dreaming, subreddit, on Reddit or whatever, what you'll find is that people who don't have a meditation practice in daily life can get into nightmares. Now, sleep paralysis and nightmares that can occur in that zone are really where the self-sense is being challenged to a huge degree, and that's being perceived as a threat. And it may be that having a meditation practice in the daytime where you're disassembling and becoming aware of selfing, which is a verb, not a noun. There isn't a self. Selfing is a process. There is discuss this more. Is there a self? Is there a self? There's foundational awareness, which people sometimes describe as self with a capital S. But selfing is how we make up the narratives and stories and the feelings of who we are, the I, me, mind thing on an ongoing basis through the course of every moment of our waking lives and in our dream states. Now, selfing then becomes this verb thing, which is what we're looking at in meditation. We're gradually finding this place within depth meditative practice where we can see ourselves doing selfing so that we know we are not selfing. We're something deeper. We are that quality of foundational awareness, not the selfing itself. So if you haven't done that work in the meditation state and you go into a lucid dreaming state, you can have your selfing challenged in that state, and it can be substantially challenged. So what happens then is you end up in nightmares. Does that make sense? So it's worthwhile building that meditative practice before you go into just doing a lucid dream practice, because then you have the beginnings of doing some really profound work within the lucid dream state. And that lucid dream state, I think it's, utterly magical. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But first of all, we're going to look at the next brainwave state. Now, these have a frequency between 0 and 4 hertz, and delta waves are usually associated with what's called dreamless sleep, known as NREM. Delta waves are the slowest, but also the highest amplitude brainwaves, and they begin to appear in stage 3 sleep, which has less than 50% delta wave activity, whereas stage 4 sleep has more than 50% delta. It's suggested that body growth, healing and rejuvenation occur most fully in the delta state, as the release of the human growth hormone releasing factor then stimulates the hypothalamus to release human growth hormone from the pituitary. And human growth hormone is necessary for growth in children, of course. That's why it's called human growth hormone, yeah? And for adolescents, of course. But it's really, really important in cellular repair and regeneration in adults. So if you don't get enough delta wave sleep, you aren't going to repair very well. You're not going to regenerate very well. Now, delta waves stimulate the release of prolactin as well, which is also regulated by the pituitary. Now, of course, prolactin is responsible for lactation in women. It's also involved in water and salt balance. It's involved in physical growth, metabolism, endocrine function, brain function, behavioral regulation, reproductive function, immune function, and many other things. So accessing this state is pretty important, and one of the reasons why sleep hygiene is critical for well-being. Metabolic activity is reduced with the reduction of the thyroid-stimulating hormone by the activity of delta waves. So deep, dreamless sleep occupies a role in metabolic and neurological regulation that is absolutely critical. Now, interestingly, women have more delta wave activity than men from the ages of 30 to 40 years old, with men showing greater age-related reductions after this age. So women who exhibit more delta waves live longer on average than men. So maybe, guys, we should be paying attention to the quality of our sleep a little bit more fully. Now, another factor that pays attention, interestingly, in longevity for women is, female longevity, is mitochondria, because mitochondria, of course, mitochondria are matrilineal. They're only passed through the female line. What I mean by that is, well, mitochondria, what are they, first of all? People call them the energy powerhouses of the cells. They are much, much more than that. They're involved in immunity. They're the reason why we die. They're the reason why we have different sexes. And an egg is about 500,000 unused, kind of pristine mitochondria, plus the genetic components of the woman. And a sperm is the genetic component from the man, and about 500 to 1,000 mitochondria which wag the tail of that sperm to get it to the egg. And when the sperm enters the egg, the male mitochondria are destroyed, usually. So that's what happens there. And those mitochondria pass from the mother to the daughters, from the mothers to the sons. Any that go through the sons then get destroyed in sexual reproduction. Those that go through the daughters then stay alive and continue. That's what matrilineal is. Those mitochondria in the woman's egg are made in the grandmother, in the womb of their mother, in the grandmother. That's the matrilineal line of mitochondria. And those mitochondria then are adapted for being in female bodies primarily. And that may be one of the reasons as well why men live shorter lives than women, because women have more highly adapted mitochondria for their body structures, hormonal balances and everything else, okay? So guys, all of us have to look after our mitochondria. Mitochondria are the medicine of the future, so we all have to look after them. And this means exercising and moving well. It means eating well. And it means don't lay down too much visceral fat. That's fat in your belly, because that's going to release some inflammatory cytokines and cause all sorts of mayhem in your body, including earlier onset cardiovascular disorders, dementia, cancers, all sorts of problems. So we don't need that. So looking at the quality and the amount of fuel we're putting into our body, looking at how we're using that through exercise, and again, over-exercise is a problem. It's not about exercise is the thing to do. It's not. It's exercise in balance with restoration. Eat well, eat quality food, breathe well, and super important, meditate. Think well and smash those stress states, because stress hurts your mitochondria badly. So delta waves are the most common waveforms in infants, but by the time we're in our mid-70s, deep sleep characterized by delta waves can be totally absent. And again, this is obviously connected to physical and cognitive decline in aging, because we haven't got those restorative functions anymore, those regenerative functions. We've kind of lost them at that age. So sleepwalking and other sleep disorders may also be associated with an absence of deep delta wave sleep. Now, delta waves can also occur in those who are proficient in deep relaxation practices, such as trance work and yoga nidra. And in states of deep meditation again, fascinatingly, you can get into delta state in really deep meditation. And this capacity is quite rare. Most people lack the necessary time and discipline to practice effectively. But we know from EEG measurements and people like Swami Rama that people can be in delta state in conversation at times. This is supremely rare. And if it happened to somebody who wasn't meditating, you'd think they were mentally ill, by the way, okay? But, think about this for a minute. Just think about it for a minute. If you can enter the delta state in your meditation practice, is your body rejuvenating itself? Very possibly. How amazing to be able to do that. How amazing to be able to navigate through your brain states with breathwork, and breathwork is an entry-level practice for meditation, let's be fair, all right? Conscious breathwork is an entry-level practice for depth meditation. So when we get into depth meditation, we can get into those states and navigate those states. So trance work, yoga nidra, deep meditation, shamanic journeying facilitate neurological and metabolic regulation, and they appear to assist the rejuvenation capacities of the body and the expansion of creativity. Now, telomeres are the protein caps on chromosomes, and they determine cell death. They determine when a cell dies. And there's a project called the Shamatha Research Project, where meditation was shown to reverse telomere degeneration and facilitate the regrowth of structures. Now, what we're talking about here is the rejuvenation at a cellular level, right? And it's probably delta waves accessed in this state that helps this rejuvenation and restoration of physical function. And again, this is a huge incentive to start, isn't it? A huge incentive to start a depth practice. Now, mu waves I want to go into very briefly. And they're synchronized patterns of electrical activity involving large numbers of neurons in parts of the brain that control voluntary movement. That's in a band across the skull here, all right? And they operate in a frequency of 8 to 13 hertz, and they occur when the body's physically resting. Now, unlike alpha waves, which are a similar frequency, mu waves don't occur in the visual cortex, but up in this band at the top here, the motor cortex, like I said here. And they decrease when motor actions are performed. Now, here comes a really interesting bit. Are you ready? They also do that when we visualize performing a motor action. So when we visualize rehearsing a skill, a movement skill, a motor action, or when we see somebody else doing it, those mu waves are suppressed. All right? And this may be evidence of mirror neuron activity, but it suggests there's a part of the role in mapping others' movements into the brain. And therefore, we're kind of learning. We know that visualization learning is really powerful. We've looked at people doing, visualization on piano learning this keyboard. And there are people who've given visualization skills and the actual piano. And the people doing the visualization skills do nearly as well as the people who have the piano. That's impressive. And we know that athletes, when they're bedbound, they can build muscle mass from doing appropriate visualizations. So the power of the mind here is phenomenal, okay? And we can learn and do things without the actual physical practice. Again, this is fascinating, isn't it, in terms of what's possible for this 1,000 trillion synaptic network of the central processor of the human life, the brain and its nervous system. Now, again, mu wave suppression may also be involved with intention. Does this suggest that intention, and again there's a yoga name for this, it's called sankalpa. Sankalpa means with seed, and it's about building intentions that can then be placed into the deep trance work states, say for example in Yoga Nidra, where you're trying to build something in your life. I am going to do a podcast. And I want to write a podcast, for example, or write a book, or I want to learn the guitar, or I want to do whatever it is that I want to do. Then those sankalpas can be dropped in a deep trance state. And they facilitate a change of focus in the mental states of somebody, so they navigate then towards that outcome, and they find a way into that outcome. Sankalpa seems to be very potent. It's used in clinical hypnotherapy. And I was trained in clinical hypnotherapy many years ago, and there's a lot of usage of what, it's not called Sankalpa there, but there's a lot of use of Sankalpa within clinical hypnotherapy. So it's very, very potent, and another interesting domain of navigating states and how we can use these for our well-being. Brainwaves in meditation depend on the developmental level of the practitioner. And these different waves can be present in meditative states. You've got your alpha waves promoting relaxation. You've got your gamma waves, potentially, with depth practice, allowing a more connected, focused state of congruence throughout the whole brain, particularly accentuating the left prefrontal cortex, remember. Then you've got your gamma spikes associated with flashes of insight. You've got your theta waves can be present, allowing deep insight and integration of subconscious material processes and linking that with the conscious mind, bringing those older, deeper memories, procedural memories of the body, linking them with thalamic memory. And they also reflect the deep relaxation that one might expect in meditation. All this can be occurring. And theta waves may also be involved in the intense learning states, like we said, such as when we find these in children under the age of 7. And in this kind of state, neuroplastic change can happen much more rapidly. So we've got this intense learning state, this deep learning state we can access through practice. Delta waves can also be present, normally only occurring in deep sleep, like we said. And the presence of these waves in meditation may well be one of the indicators of the samadhi states that yogic texts talk about. Samadhi, where non-conceptual foundational awareness is being consciously accessed. If you think about that words for a minute, non-conceptual foundational awareness. Non-conceptual means it's free of concept. If it's free of concept, it's non-linguistic. There are no words that can define it. And there are no words that can explain it. And there are no words in it. So it's going deeper into the brain than any cognitive internal dialogue, much, much deeper. So we're going into those states where cognitive internal dialogue no longer is seen as the nature of who we are, and we're going into much deeper states of foundational awareness. Of course, a lot of what people are doing in a meditation state is just dealing with that internal thinking stuff. They're just focusing in some kind of therapeutic way on what's going on at the level of internal dialogue. The focus within depth meditation is to move through that level of activity with as much grace and ease as possible, so that we recognize we are not that thinking stuff, and we can relax it, no longer focus in on that, and go deeper. And all of that can be consciously accessed with practice. It's fascinating, isn't it? So the overall pattern of brainwaves suggests the attentive, gently alert, deeply relaxed state, the blissful state that high-level practitioners report, that yoga texts talk about. And one thing I know is that this is available to anyone with the right strategic preparation and disciplined practice. And like I said, conscious breathwork is an entry-level practice into these states. Like the dreamers of science, Einstein, Ramanujan, Edison, Alice Roberts, many people, and the dreamers of music and art, Salvador Dali, Vincent van Gogh, Beethoven, Ursula K. Le Guin, name them. Dreams facilitate problem solving and the creative process. So accessing that state is really important for creativity. The most important thing if you're going to use dreams for problem solving is to prepare well before going to sleep, and to decide to recall whatever solutions or creative images appear in your mind as you do it. And as you wake, without an alarm clock, that's important, awaken naturally and peacefully, and then record those solutions, write them down, keep a pen and paper beside your bed. I've taught yoga in my dreams, and all my workshops were prepared in this realm, as were talks and even chapters of my books. I gave a talk in Mexico, and I spent 3 nights going into lucid dreaming, traveling through dream states to find out what I needed to deliver. I never wrote any of it down. I then stood up for 90 minutes and delivered a talk in front of a few hundred people without any other preparation than lucid dreaming. And during that time, I had an aura ring on so I could measure my brain states. I felt like I'd been awake during the night. I felt like I'd been journeying through South America, talking to Toltec shamans and doing all sorts of fascinating stuff, talking to different scientists. And in fact, I'd been dreaming. My aura ring told me that I'd been dreaming and in the deep sleep state. And it felt like I'd been traveling for years, researching, finding out. And the talk was delivered, and it was fun. And I do the same. I don't write my dreams down these days, but that's a good thing to do. But I go back into the dream in a state of lucidity, and I can run through and clarify anything and rehearse things. I might do a run through a workshop 10 to 20 times. Let it settle into wild mind. I then let go and let wild mind teach. Wild mind, which I consider to be my best ally, do its thing. What on earth is wild mind? Wild mind is what people used to call unconscious and subconscious and collective unconscious, all those kind of terminologies that come from Freudian, Jungian kind of analytical frameworks. I condensed them all down. Natalie Goldberg, a writer, she came up with this term. It's called wild mind. And wild mind is like all of that joined together, where you can access and bring all of that into conscious awareness. So you have this kind of direct relationship between your sense of self, your consciousness, if you like, and all that wild mind possibility. And you can tap into it as a resource, as a power tool. And of course, these practices give us access into that wild mind, that intuitivity, that sensitivity, that capacity for creativity as well. Boom. So now we're going to talk about dreams a little bit. How to utilize those dreams a little bit more, because dreams, again, the dream state is the imaginative state, is the play of creativity through our brain. It's the muse. And breathe and feel your breath. Hypnagogic dreams are the dreams at early onset of sleep, just before the body's system has shut down into sleep paralysis. They're particularly useful as strategies for problem solving and creativity enhancement. People like Thomas Edison had a practice where he held a little metal rod in his hand and drifted away in a chair, and when it dropped, he'd pick it up and go back into the state. And it's because he was in that state that he did, invention, creativity. Now, hypnopompic dreams occur in the early hours of the morning when you're drifting half asleep. That's why you don't need an alarm clock. That's why you don't have an alarm clock. You have to be able to drift half to sleep, half awake. And it's that profound state is an opportunity for problem solving, creativity enhancement. And again, that's where I love to do my preparation for writing and speaking and anything else I do. Now, the fantasy play in dreams can all be considered salient or can all be considered irrelevant. As many people believe dreams are meaningless. They're just brain activity. And for these people, they probably are. However, if you believe your dreams are a space of creative exploration, you might find they will be, might you not? So how might you choose to remember the creative solutions your dreams offer? Will you write them down? I'm curious. Let me know. I'm curious to know what you make of this if you tune all the way through here, what you make of this and what you're going to do with this information. How will it help you step forward in your life? Now, what about prophetic dreams? People talk about these too, and science says there is no empirical evidence for prophetic or precognitive dreaming, as it's called. And yet 50% of the human population say they've experienced precognitive dreams. Of course, the Bible, ancient Egyptian teachings, the Quran are replete with prophecy and prophetic dreams. Whilst shamanism also has a lot of space, a lot of airtime for prophetic dreams and visions. Now, think about this. How can we possibly remember the future? How can we remember the future, which is what prophecy is if you think about it? That's too much to believe, yes? Well, it kind of is, isn't it, really? But just for a moment, imagine an infinite now, a moment where all of time The past, the future, and the present exist simultaneously. A moment where every decision, every possibility, and every reality converge into a singular conscious experience. Now, this concept is rooted in both ancient philosophies and cutting-edge physics, and it invites us to reconsider our understanding of time as a linear construct and explore the possibility that time itself is far more fluid, multidimensional, and eternally present, much more than we take it to be. At the intersection of neuroscience and quantum physics lies the tantalizing theory that the brain's microtubules, the structural components within neurons, may function as quantum transducers. Now, Sir Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff suggest these microstructures have the potential to process information at this quantum level. And of course, this bridges the gap between the physical, macro, and the non-physical or micro realms of existence. It's all the same, making those distinctions. It's all a seamless web. Making the distinction between physical and non-physical is futile, to be honest with you. Now, Robert Sapolsky, of course, roundly dismisses this microtubule theory. But what is true? We're not fully sure yet. However, let's go a bit deeper on this theory for a minute, because if microtubules operated as quantum transducers, they could allow the brain to access states of consciousness that transcend the linear progression of time, meaning that, theoretically, the brain could tap into the timeless field, a dimension where past experiences, present awareness, and future possibilities are encoded and available simultaneously. This concept does align with quantum mechanics, where particles exist in superposition, holding multiple states at once until observed, where waves are particles, waves are energy. String theory suggests that time might function beyond our linear perception, with the universe comprising vibrating strings of energy existing across at least 11 dimensions. And in this multidimensional reality, time as we experience it as a sequential flow, because we experience time as a straight line, as it were, flowing from past to future, is unique to our dimension. Within other dimensions, time may well exist as an infinite present, where all moments coalesce, like we're suggesting. And the implication of this is profound. It is profound, as our linear perception and experience of time may be a limitation of our sensory and cognitive apparatus rather than an absolute truth. And that is kind of important because if all moments are indeed happening simultaneously in a higher dimensional kind of reality, our now is not just the present moment, but an intersection point, a focal lens through which we experience the unfolding of time in one direction, when this is not the full reality of how it is. Now, of course, you can, if you go out to a field, if you go out to the park, if you go out anywhere, you can walk forwards or backwards, side to side, you can jump up and down and think nothing of it. Now imagine timelessness with similar properties, living in a state where the past, present and future converge. And I know this is a bit Doctor Who. However, notice the radical reorientation of awareness required as you move beyond the habitual identification with memory and anticipation. Imagine that. Practices such as meditation, breathwork, mindfulness, working with timelines and hypnotherapies, psychedelics, plant medicines, shamanic journeying all offer glimpses into this state where the boundaries of time dissolve and only infinite presence remains. In timeless awareness, the past is not a fixed narrative, but a dynamic field of information accessible to reinterpretation. Similarly, the future is not a distant horizon, but a spectrum of possibilities, all coexisting and awaiting conscious interaction. By entering this state, we transcend the constraints of liminarity and step into a dimension of infinite potential. Imagine that. Imagine this. Now, according to theoretical physics, it's possible that our universe, as we know it, is one of not just 11, but of 17 possible dimensions. Now, of course, most of these dimensions remain imperceptible to us, but time stands out as the only dimension we experience linearly and unidirectionally. Like I said, this limitation may be a byproduct of the evolution of the brain for its survival functions, giving it physical existence and a sense of continuity in three-dimensional space. Yet, if we could access multidimensional consciousness, the linearity of time would dissolve, revealing its perhaps True nature is a dynamic, interconnected continuum, an expanded perspective, a vast multidimensional landscape instead of a straight line. Imagine time as a multi-dimensional living tapestry where every thread represents sequences of moments and all threads weave together into a unified whole of vibrant texture, seamless color, meaning and interpretation. By tuning our consciousness to this multi-dimensional reality, we might just begin to see the past, present, and future as accessible and malleable elements within this timeless field. Now, understanding timelessness isn't just a theoretical exercise, a mind game. It's an invitation to live differently, to live powerfully, to live well, because when we anchor ourselves in the infinite now of expanded presence, we open to a profound sense of freedom, curiosity, and creativity, exploration, and play, don't we? The linear constraints of regret, worry, expectation, apprehension, anticipation, and anxiety fall away, replaced by this vast trust in the unfolding of the tapestry of life. In this state, we become co-creators within and as the universe, actively shaping our reality by aligning with the ever-present, ever-changing, seamless field of possibility. Time, as we may know it, may be just one lens through which we view the universe, and by stepping into the timeless dimension, we unlock a greater understanding of existence where all of time is here and now, waiting for our conscious exploration. And in this situation, prophetic or precognitive dreams are relatively normal. Just imagine that. One really important dream for me was horrific enough to wake me up sweating, sitting bolt upright in the middle of the night. I dreamt I was in a motorcycle crash and I lost my legs. This was back in the day when I worked as a motorcycle dispatch rider. I was working for a company called Pony Express in London. I immediately went downstairs and fitted some crash bars I had lying around for months, and I put them on my motorcycle. Now, later that same day, I had a very bad crash on the embankment in London. I was driven into by two vehicles, squashed between two vehicles, and if I'd not had those bars fitted, I would have seriously damaged my legs, if not lost them. Now, the question is, was that dream prophetic? Clearly not, as I didn't lose my legs. But it was functional foreboding. It was a dream of functional foreboding. It called me into action and protected me from losing my legs. So however you see the dream, number one, it was spooky. Number two, it was foretelling a possible future. And if I hadn't acted, it could have been the outcome. I have no way of knowing. But I have had a few other foreboding dreams that were so powerful as to compel me into action. Every time I experience these kinds of dreams, I have then taken preventive or delimited the horrific outcome as presented in that dream by acting. I don't ignore dreams like that. What's your experience? Let me know. I'm interested. Now, dreams we take as prophetic may, of course, just be coincidence, and that's what many scientists say. However, coincidence does not explain foreboding dreams. Certainly, we tend to attribute causation where there's just correlation. We may randomly dream about something several times over on different nights and then only attribute meaning and prophetic causation to it when an event happens that is important or emotionally salient to us. That may be what's happening. Remember, correlation simply means two events happening in space-time that are not directly connected, except that they both happen. Whereas causation is when one thing directly precedes another and leads to it. And we humans tend to mistake correlation for causation. We humans commonly do this with our meaning-making functions rooted in limited evidence or led by superstitious or magical thought process, which maybe I'm susceptible to as well, that fails to see an even larger picture of possibility. We also do the confusion of correlation and causation in our stories about the world. Causation is an important part of our narrative creation structures. Everything begins somewhere, doesn't it? What was the first cause? There's always a first cause. There's a beginning. There must have been one, surely. It can't just be infinite, can it? And there's always somebody to blame. There's always a reason. There's already somebody who did something to make something happen. Not understanding the seamless web of multiple variables, all interaction to create an event, we confuse reality and say, this is the person to blame, this is the thing to blame. But what came first, the chicken or the egg? What came first? What came first? Is the effect cause revealed? Is a cause merely an effect of a prior cause or a multiple array of causes? Some we see and most we don't. We humans love causation. We love the idea of objective reality and the solid answers it appears to offer, don't we? We love to feel safe by the meaning-making we create. We also love bias confirmation, which is consistently proving ourselves right and ignoring the data, the information that says anything else. Now, bias confirmation avoids uncertainty and doubt. This is how social media rabbit holes work, and it's actually reducing your brain networks. It's a way of keeping you safe in certainty, but it's also a kind of trauma response, because we feel safe knowing that we know and that our fears and stories are confirmed. All our worst fears and stories are confirmed by bias confirmation. So we can feel safe in the world. We don't have to learn. We don't have to change. We don't have to do any of the work of not knowing, because doubt and not knowing is the beginning of learning. I don't know. I'm just creating what is true. Doubt is the beginning of learning and greater intelligence, not the certainty of bias confirmation. The certainty of bias confirmation is slowly shutting your brain down. Now, dreams may be a reflection of the other unconscious strategies of the wild mind, functions of the brain and nervous system that we get a flavour of consciously and consider it prophetic when an underlying issue has been rumbling around for such a long time, like we say. But then again, if we consider the possibility that the surreal qualities of quantum entanglement suggest unicity at a very deep level, which of course is the reality of the situation of the universe, that is both before and concurrent with the phenomenal universe, before this universe, and concurrent with it. Maybe our other than conscious brains access this quantum informational field, and hey presto, we have prophetic possibilities. Dreams probably don't operate much outside of the self-construct at all. It's not like deep sleep where the self-construct is shut down, the selfing mechanisms are put to sleep, literally. Yet dreams certainly allow creative exploration and fluidity around this self-construct, and in this way can be powerful possibilities for understanding how we craft our self-story and our relational dynamics of how we relate to others. And if we can get inside our self-story and how we relate to others, we have the freedom to define and redefine them in terms of those relationships. And the great practices of Tibetan Buddhism and such practices go inside those dynamics and redefine them in terms of compassion and wisdom. Intelligence, understanding the seamless web of life, understanding the interacting, interdependent relationships between everything, and understanding the roots of how it is to be a human being, what it is to be a human being. We define and redefine those relationships in terms of compassion, creativity, and wisdom. If we feel insecure and challenged by the nature of whom we think we are in the face of what appears to be a very hard and limited reality, at times, life exigencies push us to our edges, then dreams that show fluidity in the self-story would be interpreted, like I suggested, as if they were threats to one's identity, position, and narrative, rather than the living possibilities they could be. And such a challenged viewpoint would view such liberating dreams as nightmares. How willing are you to play with your self-story construction in dreams, and possibly dissolve it and recreate it afresh? How willing are you to take up a meditation practice so that you can do this in your conscious life? Or would all of that be too scary? Or would it be an amazing opportunity to go deeper into curiosity, creativity, joy? Remember that left prefrontal cortical activity in the gamma state is that advanced, extreme, non-contextual joy. Sometimes people take psychedelics such as iboga, 5-MeO, DMT, LSD, psilocybin, and occasionally ketamine. And these are partly why people use these mind medicines, is to dissolve the self-story and go inside. But remember, sitting meditation, yogic trance work, somatic yoga, breath work, shamanic journeying all support the kind of strength, resilience, and fluidity that can allow playfulness around identity. A resilience that would interpret Identity-challenging dreams, not as threatening, but as an opportunity. Imagination is a creative function. It's a powerful human asset, a superpower, and dreams are a form of imagination. What are you dreaming? What did you dream last night? What dreams inform you? Curiously, the hippocampus is utilized to record recent events from memory. It's involved in creating biographical memory, where we remember things in terms of time, like I said, okay? And we need this function to survive and thrive. And yet in REM sleep, it's mostly shut down unless we're doing that bit of memory consolidation. Now, the prefrontal cortex and certainly the dorsolateral part of it is also shut down in REM sleep unless we're lucid dreaming. And we train this in meditation to stay on. And it's this bit of the brain that facilitates logical reasoning. So in lucid dreaming, it's these parts that get disinhibited and allow the spectrum of control that lucid dreamers report. So in dreams, the amygdala and limbic systems are much more prevalent, which is why dreams have an overly emotive quality and a sensory motor quality to them compared to waking life. But it's probably the same memory associative networks used to build the flow of narrative in both dream and waking consciousness. And daydreaming, dreams, and creative imagination use similar networks of brain function. So the question is this: who could you imagine yourself becoming? How creative can you be with identity, with your selfing, with evolving and growing in this life as who you could become? Time distortion occurs in waking consciousness, as we all know. There are those times when time is sticky and drags like thick treacle, and there are times when time flows so fast that we cannot believe just how those hours, days, weeks, even years, and sometimes even decades flew by. Time, from a subjective perspective, is of course largely how we measure change. Change is movement measured through sensory awareness. The sensory awareness of the body and external events is switched off during sleep, so we could expect time distortion to be normal in dreams, and it is, of course. In sleep and dreams, environmental cues and proprioception are also shut down, so we expect space distortion to be normal in dreams, and it is. Now, neuroscientist Matthew Wilson has measured the activity of rats' brains during sleep and found that during REM sleep, memories replay at the same speed as normal waking consciousness, more or less. But during NREM sleep, however, memories can run speeded up by 100 times. Time distortion. What does this tell us about the relationship between REM and NREM sleep, and REM and NREM sleep and waking consciousness? We have so much to learn. We have so much we don't know yet from an empirical base, and we have so much each of us doesn't know from a subjective base because we're still exploring. But we know that REM sleep produces a relative paralysis of the body that prevents us from acting out our dreams. Now, in some sleep disorders called parasomnias, where this paralysis is less effective, this action can occur through walking, hitting out, sleep talking, and other behaviors. And, I remember one time I was going through a particularly tough time. I jumped up in bed and things like that. One of my children was sleepwalking. These things happen. That aside for now, we know that a part of the brain called the temporoparietal junction processes visual and touch signals, as well as proprioceptive information from balance and spatial information from joints, tendons and musculature that brings all our body parts into relationship and a cohesive sense of unity. So this TPJ creates our sense of embodiment. Our sense of embodiment includes where our body is in its environment, where the body begins and where the body ends. When the sense of self is separated from the sense of embodiment, and the sense of self goes with information from other parts of the brain, which may suggest movement, and the body feels like it's left behind, so it is that we can fly in our dreams. Space and time are totally distorted in the dream world, and with an anxious state of mind, this can be terrifying. With lucidity, it can be fun, until we meet the dragons. So remember, even dragons like a good joke. They do. And you have to make friends with the dragons like you did when you were young and lived in the theta state. Dragons and all the creatures of myth and fairy in the dream state were your friends. Do you remember? Traumatic experience fragments memory and causes disintegration of the informational web of the body-mind, as the hippocampus, which temporarily binds experience into a self-oriented narrative, your biography like we talked about, is utterly overwhelmed by the neurochemicals of trauma. The resultant amygdalic or procedural memory is triggered, and it can be really intrusive without sufficient self-compassion, and it becomes projected outwards. And whenever we're triggered, we project. Whenever we have that amygdalic procedural memory, we can project it onto other people. Whenever we are triggered, we tend to project. You did this. You made me feel this. You did this to me. You did this. Now, fascinatingly, Alice Miller, the great and gifted Swiss psychologist and psychotherapeutic thought leader, born in 1922, who died in 2010, clearly saw the connection between trauma and creativity, and she wrote about this. Trauma is pushed outwards as blame, shame, anger, and hatred if the individual has not had sufficient compassion, care, and witness of their authentic self in their developmental years. This happened to both Hitler and Stalin and any current despot who blames those others for the crisis they face internally. They are doing the same, that projection. If the traumatized individual has sufficient care and witness of their authentic self-sense, and they feel that, then the trauma manifests as art, music, drama, playing, sculpture, dance, as we see with people like Salvador Dali, Vincent van Gogh, and so many musicians. Traumatic experience impacts who we are, and yet this impact can arise as creativity if we have sufficient connection to our authentic self through the compassionate gaze of a caring other. We are relational. We exist and we grow out of wombs, out of relationship. And that relationship impacts and affects us. And if that compassionate gaze was absent or insufficient, we come through trauma with bitterness, anger, blaming, shaming, and hating. We're out of touch with the compassionate depths of our own authentic self and can no longer see clearly. We can no longer see the interdependent weave of life, the seamless web of life as it is, and we pinpoint fingers of blame and project onto others. That's exactly what happens. Now, stress can also impact creativity. The more we feel separate from others, from life, from our authentic self, the less creative our responses become. We get reactive, we struggle to see complexity, and once again end up blaming and shaming. So few of us learn the skills of regulation, of self-soothing, which is a function of the orbitofrontal cortex that grows in the maternal dyad. We learn to auto-regulate through this co-regulation. We are taught to do it by our parents, by our mother, by the people that love us. We learn to calm and care for our own nervous systems through learning it in this dyadic relationship. And of course, if they can't do it, we can't, because we didn't learn it. However, we can learn it later in life through good practice, diligence, meditation, journeying, the compassionate gaze of others, and adaptation. It's not a given, though. Learning to drop deep, to unfold into our authentic self and prevent stress cascades, as well as to learning to calm them once they've started, gives us the auto-regulatory reset, the capacity to turn on our orbitofrontal cortex that can keep us facing into complexity with a creative mindset, staying curious, remaining compassionate in the face of intense adversity. Exploration and play can only happen when we feel safe enough. They are the keys to learning and as crucial for adults as they were for children. And without self-regulatory capacities, we cannot access these states. Curiosity is one of the primary roots of creativity, exploration and play. If we're so stressed or traumatized that our capacity to explore and play is shut down, then we cannot access that root curiosity. So learn to play, learn to explore, pick up a ball of mud and craft it into a shape. Make some vocal sounds. Remain non-judgmental. Put words on paper. Paint, write poetry, dance, find out what happens when you do X or Y or Z, and remain curious. Remain curious is this root of curiosity. Another great killer of creativity is shame. Shame is a visceral sense of not being good enough, that there's something wrong with us deep in who we are. It's a learned dissociation from our authentic self. I know it well in myself. The self, this shame, the self that is independent of the thoughts that go through our head, we become dissociated from this. We become dissociated from the emotions that rise from our body. Our authentic self so often gets shut down in a battle between authenticity and attachment. We have to belong as mammals, and we pay the price for belonging. That essential mammalian need. By having to belong at all costs, we shrink, delimit, torture, and dissociate from our authenticity. We split and fragment if the price of being authentic means we don't fit in. If we won't be loved, we bend and we cut ourselves into pieces, even if that love is completely conditional and dependent on us fitting in, and it often is. It's in the dissociation from our authentic self that empathy, connection, real love, and care and creativity die. But they can be reborn like the phoenix. Now, in that state of dissociation, we may be able to manufacture facsimiles of creativity, but those things are copies of what we've learned, copies of what other people have done. They help us look creative. Copies, we become replicators, technicians of play, not playful, not authentic creators. So much of social media, sadly, is cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste, like and replicate, like and replicate, like and replicate. While this may have value, it's not authentic creativity. Authentic creativity is lost in the matrix of shame and dissociation that our culture, sadly, creates so well. So many of us moderns, sitting in the soup of transgenerational trauma and existential threat, exist within this soup. So finding vast, spacious, non-conceptual awareness that cannot be named or owned in your depth meditation practice, so it's not who you think you are, who you think you're becoming. It's not the flow of feeling that moves through us. As the Gaels say, the Gaelic language, emotion moves through you. Sadness is moving through me. It's not I am sad, but this finding of this deep inner self, the foundational awareness, is the work of freedom, the play of meditation, and a profound step into being the artist of life, the authentic creative that you are born to be. Now, we've looked at the theta state as a neural correlate for creativity. Other correlates are divergence and convergence, and these are beautiful to understand. Divergence is when your brain is noticing anything and everything without any real focus. It can be like daydreaming. It's an open and spacious awareness that is noticing without gripping or flowing any and all arising phenomena. Maybe it's movement, the flickering of the leaves on the trees. Maybe it's sunlight on the water. Maybe it's sounds from close or afar. Maybe sensations in the body. Maybe of blood moving or the breath. Maybe the flow of emotion that is, as my Irish ancestor would say, moving through you. Sadness is moving through. Happiness is moving through. The emotion remains ungripped, not identified with. It's allowed to move. Another skill we often fail to learn as children because of the lack of emotional intelligence of our caregivers, and often the bubbling up and flow of thoughts, memories, stories, meanings, and apprehensions of the future, all drifting and remaining unwoven into a fossilized narrative of me and who I'm becoming, gives us greater freedom. Learning to rest deep into divergence is a profound skill that is another primary root of creativity. The practice of this has been called many names: Taoist illumination, shamatha, calm abiding, santosha, finding the deep center of peace and ease within the flow of all arising phenomena and allowing all phenomena to play. This is divergence. Then there's convergence. And convergence is super challenged in the short attentional span of the digital age. Convergence is the capacity to focus on one thing, one phenomena at will for extended periods. It is hyper-focus. what in yoga land they call ekagrata dharana, one-pointed focus of mind, the sense of self as subject, focused exclusively through the medium of one of the self fields onto the appearance of a separate phenomena as object. That's a very precise definition of a Sanskrit term that is usually badly translated as concentration. But if we break it down like this, there's so much more creative juice in it. It isn't just concentration. That's for orange juice. This is about freedom of identity and the recognition of the seamless web of life bound together into the subject-object relations that we take for granted in our deluded, hyper-individualistic, separatist and materialist culture. Take a breath. Take a breath and feel it fully. Feel your heartbeat. As you breathe in oxygen. The millions of molecules of oxygen in your breath cross over the lung-blood boundary into the hemoglobin, where they're carried around the body, pumped by the heart. Pumped by the heart. And they cross into the cells, into the mitochondria, where your mitochondria use them as an electron acceptor to enable the mitochondria to produce ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate, the miracle molecule, the signature of life on Earth, on which all living things depend. This ATP fuels your thinking, your feeling, your movement, everything, and all your creativity. And all of it comes from this oxidative phosphorylation that is enabled by oxygen being breathed in. And the oxygen that you breathe in, all of it, without exception, is made by plants. Green, living things, cyanobacteria and plants. Apart from a tiny little bit of dark oxygen made in the bottom of the ocean, the rest is made by plants. And your life is dependent on them and dependent on this oxygen. And if you check, that oxygen goes to every single one of the 37 trillion cells of your body. And there is no clear boundary between the sunlight and the photons entering the plant which spit that water. The water's split into hydrogen, oxygen. The hydrogen is woven in with carbon dioxide to make sugars, which you then eat as fuel, which fuels your mitochondria when you eat them. And that itself is then joined up with oxygen also from the plants to create the ATP that your life depends on. Everything is a seamless web. It is one seamless, whole, continuous web. Everything you do. The whole 37 trillion cells of your body with 1 billion chemical interactions per second, all facilitated by this ATP, a seamless web. The hyper-individualistic, separate chunks of matter story that our culture relies on to promote and sustain capitalism is a grand illusion, a theatre of the absurd. When you come into convergence from the place of passion, the recognition of potential and possibility, and you feel your own brain restructuring itself as you dive deeper and deeper in, you get that the balance of convergence and divergence are not just about making music or painting a picture or coming up with a new product for marketing, but something way, way deeper. The journey of infinite, endless creativity, the arising of an ever more expansive, creative, compassionate and wise sense of self that is itself the artist within life as life. The artist that dreams worlds into being. What are you dreaming into being now? What are we dreaming into being collectively right now, and why? How does it serve us? Who does it serve? Scientists and artists throughout time and space have all dreamt up worlds of possibility out of the balance of convergence and divergence, dropping into the theta state and finding oneself ever deeper in the seamless web as the continuity, the beginning, the middle and the end of this universe, finding that part of you that is at least 13.8 billion years old, that part that is manifested through the forces of evolution as star stuff, as the ultra-cooperative bacteria, as the autotrophs, the magical plants that we take for granted that make their own food from sunlight, carbon dioxide and water, or the mycelial wisdom of fungi that break down all that is decaying and act as a key part of the communicative web of the forest and of life. Then there are those heterotrophs, those of us creatures that consume and eat and excrete in endless cycles of our short lifespan, building ant nests, beavers' dams, or human empires of fear and futility, or, of course, crafting creative works of incredible beauty, each of us propelled and compelled by the attachment conditions we relied on as infants to sculpt our brains, by the trajectories of trauma or the savagery of relentless stress, and the social narratives that seek to define who we should be or become in the inevitable face of life and death. All of it dependent on the microbiome on our skin, the microbiome in our guts of fungus and bacteria, and none of us know exactly when death might happen. So remember, every breath you take, every step you take is one breath, one step closer to death, and let death be your ally. Be real about the life audit. Every hour is precious. Every second is precious. Every breath is precious. Who do you choose to be in this weave of life? Who do you choose to become? What do you choose to dream into existence, and why? What are we dreaming into existence collectively, and why? What do you choose to create from the resource of your life energy? Do you have choice, or are you compelled by those ancient dynamics of conditions that bind you and trap you? Can you find the creative freedom to live fully? Half close your eyes, reduce the visual information coming into the visual cortex, rest comfortably, put the tip of the tongue behind the top teeth on the roof of your mouth and let it relax and rest. To relax trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve 5. Relax your shoulders, cranial nerve 11. Take a slow inhalation through the nose, spreading your nostrils very, very gently. And extend that exhale just a little bit. Feel the breath. Feel the whole of the breath. Get that breath down into your belly as best you possibly can right now. Breath is a learned behavior, so maybe you've learned to breathe in your upper chest. Come and work with me and we'll turn that around. But meantime, the best you can, in through the nose and down into your belly. Let that belly expand like a gentle, full balloon as you breathe in low and slow. Nasal, low and slow. When you breathe in fully, hold the breath for a micro moment and just feel it. Just feel it gently, gently, gently before you extend that exhale. Lengthen that exhale as much as you possibly can. Comfortably do. Tuning into every part of the breath with the fullness of your awareness. Feeling everything around you and feeling the whole of the body. Everything in your awareness field. The sounds around you, the space around you, the space inside you. Feel the breath. Add a little extra bit of inhale, so a double inhale into the belly and then a little bit into the lower ribs. Hold it for a moment and extend that exhale. And see how long and slow you can make the breath. And allow yourself to begin to dream a whole new world into existence for yourself and for the people you love. Now, as you breathe, see if you can extend that breath deeper and deeper to get to fit two breaths a minute. That's a 15-second inhale, 15-second exhale or so. And as you slow the breath down, maybe you can get to one breath a minute. 30-second inhale, 30-second exhale. And as you do so, you'll be dropping through those states, down into theta, down into delta. Navigate, stay aware, stay present, prefrontal cortex, relaxed, switched on. Left prefrontal cortex, high states of joy, non-contextual joy. Dropping, navigating through the states. Dreaming the world. One breath per minute. And then add in some eye saccades, left to right, moving the eyes underneath the almost closed eyelids, left to right to left, left to right to left, as fast as they will comfortably go. Find the natural rhythm for them. Allow this to drop you deep into the creative theta state. dropping in, aware of everything around you. Eyes moving left to right, right to left. Staying present, staying clear, staying here, staying fully here, fully present, fully clear, fully in this state. And then relax the eyes. Relax the eyes. Pay attention to everything. The movement of blood, the sound of the breath, the feeling of the breath. Thoughts, emotions, moods, the air on your skin, sensation, touch, smell, everything. Just noticing everything. The flickering and the play of phenomena. And then bring your attention, draw it fully and completely onto the breath, the movement of the breath into the nostrils, through the nostrils, the belly expanding, the physical sensations of the breath. Feel the breath completely and utterly, fully drawing your attention into it, coming into convergence. And of course you could play between these two, divergence and convergence. It's a great way of training the brain between these states to access even deeper creativity. And as you focus on the breath, allow the self to dissolve, the small self, the selfing, the narrative of who you are, the I, me, mine thing. Let it dissolve and find nobody there just for a moment. And as you come into flow in the breath, this becomes easier and easier as these parts of the brain, such as the default mode network, the DMN, shut down and be quiet for a while. And you can find the deeper sense of self, the confidence, the compassion, the kindness, the creativity, the responsivity, the curiosity of this beautiful part of being that you also are, deep inside. You're dropping deeper than all the parts of you, those parts that are scared or frightened, or as the IFS systems calls them, exiles and firefighters and managers. You're going in deeper still into this deeper part of who you are, dissolving everything. Dissolving everything. And then dropping even deeper. Dropping even deeper. Dropping into the inconceivable, that which cannot be conceived of, that which cannot be named, that which cannot be known except by itself, that which the yoga texts talk about. Drop in, drop into space, drop ever deeper. And now, breathe in, breathe in, breathe in the whole of this physical existence that you are. All the cells, 37 trillion cells, the sinews, the synapses, the muscles, the bones, everything into this beautiful heart space in the center of your chest, and hold it there like you're hugging yourself for a moment. And breathe out kindness and appreciation to every single cell of who you are. Every single cell, without exception. And repeat a few times, just breathing in, holding the physical body in this space, and breathing out kindness and appreciation to the physicality of who you are, even compassion, self-compassion, compassion to this livingness, care of this livingness. And then breathe in all the emotions you've ever experienced, all the emotions you could ever experience into the heart space, and hold them, understand them for what they are, ways the body is trying to make sense of energy and relationship. And hold them there, and breathe out appreciation and kindness for them, for their constantly seeking to inform you about the nature of your energy resource and about the nature of your relationship. Are you connected? Are you separated? And breathe, gently and fully. And then all your thinking, your narratives, your meanings, your beliefs, your values, your stories, everything. All the ideas, all the stories you've ever had about yourself or anyone or anything, breathe them into the heart space and hold them there. Your brain, this wonderful 1,000 trillion synaptic brain, seeking to make sense out of the cosmos. Breathe it all in and breathe out kindness and appreciation to this wonderful, amazing, creative miracle of life. And then breathe in the electromagnetic web of who you are, into the heart space, the 144,000 lines that the yoga texts talk about, into the heart space, and breathe out kindness, appreciation, clarity, compassion. Into the air around you, into the weave of life around you, creating a mandala of clarity. And then breathe in all those relationships that are dear to you. Breathe them in and hold them there. I wonder how creative it's possible to be in relationship. And breathe out kindness and appreciation, care, compassion to all of those relationships without exception. Breathe them in, hold them, and breathe out kindness, care, appreciation, and compassion. And in this way, build a mandala of compassion in your life, a mandala of creative compassion. And all of you, without exception, your relationships, the electromagnetic weave of who you are, your cognitions, your emotions, your body, the sensory motor experience of being alive. Breathe it all into the heart space. And hold it all there. And breathe it out slowly. Breathe it out slowly. Breathe it out slowly. Kindness, care, compassion, and appreciation for life. And find the creative possibility in life that you are capable of, that is your birthright. Breathe in slowly and breathe out humming your brain behind your eyes, jiggle these neurosynapses a little. And again, breathing in. Feeling the vibration of that hum moving through your body down into the chest and around the head. And if you want to, you can add in those primal sounds, the ah, the ooh. The tongue is in the middle of the throat, the primal sounds of ah and ooh and aum, which represent, they are the vibrational metaphors and realities of the creative state, of the waking state, the state of dream, the state of sleep, and cosmic consciousness, the foundational awareness that weaves with all of space. Those sounds represent that. Just take a moment, breathe in if you choose to, and breathe out. And the silence. When you're ready, softly open your eyes. Look around you. Look around the space you're in. Notice life. Notice everything and allow difference to be. Allow not knowing to be a vital part of your life, because not knowing is one of the ultimate roots of creativity. Thank you for tuning in with me. Thank you for staying to the end of the journey. Please spread the word about this. Share it out into the world in a good, positive and powerful way. Have a beautiful rest of day, whatever you're doing. And I look forward to seeing you again downstream, online, in any way that works, whatever serves you. Stay blessed.